Hey kids, this is the first video in the series about the Insidious Way, which is my personal ideology. I've been working on this for about 15 years, and I think I've come to a place where I can talk about it with people who already, or with people that aren't already in the know about certain aspects of it. And though it's not necessarily going to be a regimented delivery as requested by Mr., it should still be informative enough that you can keep up with what it is that I'm talking about and why. Some of you will remember me from a podcast that focused on the left-hand path about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, called The Ooze. That podcast started off with me and Derek Dishaw, aka Venger Satanis, teaming up to discuss different topics from Lovecraft to occultism, and it further evolved into some social commentary, some mild political discussion, as well as a lot of interviews with different characters from across the online left-hand path. During the time that the Ooze started, I was settling into and becoming familiar with what was then called the Cult of Cthulhu. One of the most attractive things about the Cult of Cthulhu to me was the idea that reality is a prison. And it's not something novel to the Cult of Cthulhu. As a matter of fact, it seems to be the basis for most major religions, even religions that are more philosophy than they are actual religions, like Buddhism, for example. All of these things seem to kind of focus on the idea of liberation from this reality, which feels like a prison. Now, as I said in my last video, it's probably mostly up here, although there are a lot of external forces that are present that make it feel like a prison as well. Still, you kind of just have to take it on the front that it is, in fact, mostly up here. But what happens up here, if you have any kind of understanding, you realize that what's up here is always what you can look out and find out there. Anyway, without further ado, and to kind of dive into this topic a little bit, we are going to be discussing two aspects of the Insidious Way today. The first of which being essence, followed by influence. During my time with the Cult of Cthulhu, I became familiar with and began deeply studying the writings of P.D. Ouspensky and George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. The Fourth Way really seemed to offer some attractive ideas to me. They, like many other different religious approaches, view reality as a form of prison, and it's set in such a way that you're working to liberate yourself from this prison. The argument that seems to be offered in the Fourth Way is that no single person can do anything that will ultimately change the deterministic properties of reality. And what I mean is that there's nothing that one person can do that will, I don't know, undo what is unfolding in front of us. But through the Insidious Way, which is further work upon a concept that Gurdjieff presented called the Sly Man, the Insidious Way proposes that if we can fortify our essence, if we can strengthen our life force, and we are also able to recognize the nature of reality in front of us, that we can at least manipulate on a scale beyond our own worldview. So, essence, being the first portion of this whole thing, is important. Strengthening your essence, developing, concentrating, and fortifying it is one of the chief aims of the Insidious Way. Throughout history and in different cultures, this thing that I'm talking about, our essence, has been known by many different names. It's been called Chi, it's been called Kai. The ancient Egyptians referred to these two parts of one thing. It was actually like a 9-part thing or something like that. But the ones I'm interested in were called the Ka and the Ba. I've heard it referred to by different New Agers as breath or life force. The Abrahamic traditions view the same things that I'm talking about as spirit and soul. And in my own personal observation, if I am to define my essence in any way, it can only be that it is my experience. I think it's fascinating that Chloe Ortega once discussed this particular idea and used the term suchness. And so, the definition, as I would put it, essence is the intrinsic nature of something. Now, that's something being our experience. I do have somewhat of a disagreement with what might be a general dictionary definition of the term essence. And it's not really a disagreement with what their definition is, just a disagreement of how that definition applies to what I'm talking about, and that is that it's somehow indispensable. I believe that an essence is not immovable. On the other hand, with certain activities, one example being what might be known as a insight role in the Order of Nine Angles philosophy. It's an excellent way to really separate the wheat from the chaff, to look into yourself and say, well, I am this and not that. And you do this by assigning a role that may be completely different than the one that you are taking naturally. For instance, let's say I'm a devout Christian and I want to grow my essence. I could choose to become an atheist, and it's not enough to just pretend to be an atheist. You have to really put everything into it. You have to change the way that you think about things based on it. You have to change the way that you would act about things based on it. More or less convincing yourself that you are in fact now an atheist. When a certain length of time is over, you can look back at it and decide to go back to who you were. You can consider the project complete, I guess. And you will have gained something. What you gain will be specific to the experience that you had during this time in the insight role. But you will, in fact, have come back with an experience that is unique to you. It's different than what you would have experienced had you not undertaken this task. And it'll be valuable because of that. I got some notes right here, and I'm trying to keep this video under 20 minutes. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that or not, but this is really just kind of a one-on-one deal anyway. I'm hoping that this will at least spur some questions in the comments here. A little bit of activity, because it's much easier for me to do this sort of thing if I am talking to somebody. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but that's just kind of how my mind works. There are 3 traditional paths, according to Gurdjieff, to the fortification and strengthening of your essence. Those paths were the yogi, the fakir, and the monk, representing the 3 major schools of thought at that point in time. He proposed the way of the sly man, which is the 4th way, which is more of a moving, fluid way. In each of the traditional 3 paths, you end up confining yourself within a different prison in order to escape the prison that you're currently in. Where the idea of the 4th way was that you would liberate yourself by watching directly your interactions with what you're experiencing. Now, it becomes interesting to me because it's related to and almost identical to this concept that I have in the outward called influence. Some of the ideas of influence out there are memeplex or mass hysteria or just influence as you generally know the term. There are different kinds of influence. There are physical influences such as gravity, solar radiation, sparsity of food or plentifulness of food, diet, exercise. The list is endless. And we are literally swimming in a ocean of influences. And I don't think I really need to spend a long time trying to draw out what different influences there are. I think the average man can look at life and go, well, you know, I drink a beer, I'm under the influence. I follow a particular political ideology, I'm under the influence. And this is what I believe the building blocks are for our prison, the prison that I was talking about. One of the best examples in history of this prison comes from the story of the Buddha. And what transpired prior to his awakening to the sufferings in the world was, in fact, its own construct of a prison. He, was kept inside the castle walls. He was never allowed to see death or sickness. I'm sure he was fed rich foods and was never known to experience any kind of suffering. It was an illusion painted for him. And it wasn't a prison with the idea that it would keep him locked up from everything as a prisoner, but it was a prison constructed to kind of force him into the direction in which they thought was best for him. Now, what's neat to me is upon the realization that he was in fact living in an illusion in this prison, he immediately goes out and he confines himself into another type of prison, and then another type of prison, until I'm sure one day it clicked in his head that no matter what he did in this state of reality, we can never truly be free from these prisons. Call it the mortal toil or whatever it is. There is no escape. Only maybe there is. Maybe we can do something. And that's what the Insidious Way is really all about. Finding that way that we can do something. Do I think that anyone out there has the answers? No. Do I think I'm going to be offering any kind of answers? No. But I will, in fact, be posing good questions. And that is what it's about. In the meantime, I'm going to try to affect change in the insidious way, in the way of slowly and gradually trying to take more and more influence in my control. The first part of it is separating my essence from as much outer influence as possible. And the second part of it is infecting my essence to the outer influences. Now, do I think that everybody should be working for my particular infection? No. I think everybody should be working towards making their own impact, creating their own influence. Influence is literally raw power. It is literally the thing that drives. They say knowledge is power. Well, knowledge is also subjective to influence. So, is it better to be the king or to be the kingmaker? And I had a bunch of other stuff to go on, but we're nearing up to the 20-minute mark on this video. I think it's 20 minutes right now. I really don't want to push it too much further, so we'll call this Essence and Influence 101. If you guys are interested in further hearing me run my mouth, place it in the comments below. Please give me a hand. I need to get up to 1,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already subscribed, click that subscribe button. Tell your friends, send them over. I'm willing to talk about this. Jason King, keep it coming, brother. And the rest of you, I'll talk to you later.